See Naja Abarera Legos Ram Ori Banish C10 Demonio Dinaja 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 Abarera Legos Ram Ori Banish Demonio. Dinaja. Abarera. Legos. Ram. Ori. Banish. C10. 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 Demonio. Dinaja. Abarera. Legos. Ram. Ori. Banish. C10.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Satan and Coffee, Sunday Black Mass. I hope you're all doing well. As always, as we begin, hail Satan, hail Lilith, hail Lucifer, hail Pyman, hail Baphomet, Hail thyself. We reject the Trinity, we reject the baptism of John, and we reject the baptism of the Spirit. Hope you're all doing well today. Good to see everybody in here. Evie, Candace, welcome, welcome. So no drama in the Black Mass. I know that between the video that I had uploaded and the last episode of Apocrypha, there has been a specific focus in the last few pieces of content. Today will not be following that direction. So let us begin reading. So we're going to be jumping into Hell, the Devil, and How to Sell Your Soul. So here we go. Satan has certainly been the best friend the church has ever had, as he has kept it in business all these years. The false doctrine of hell and the devil has allowed the Protestant and Catholic churches to flourish far too long. Without a devil to point their fingers at, religionists of the right-hand path would have nothing with which to threaten their followers. Satan leads you to temptation. Satan is the prince of evil. Satan is vicious, cruel, brutal, they warn. If you give in to the temptations of the devil, you will surely suffer eternal damnation and roast in hell. The semantic meaning of Satan is the adversary, or opposition, or the accuser. The very word devil comes from the Indian Devi, which means God. Satan represents opposition to all religions which serve to frustrate and condemn man for his natural instincts, as has been given an evil role simply because he represents the carnal, earthly, and mundane aspects of life. Candace, thank you very much for the $3. Thank you. Thank you. Greatly appreciate that. Satan, the chief devil of the Western world, was originally an angel whose duty it was to report human delinquencies to God. It was not until the 14th century that he began to be depicted as an evil deity who was part man and part animal, with goat-like horns and hooves. Before Christianity gave him the name Satan, Lucifer, etc. The carnal side of man's nature was governed by the god which was then called Dionysus, or Pan, depicted as a satire, or faun, by the Greeks. Pan was originally the good guy and symbolized fertility. Whenever a nation comes under a new form of government, the heroes of the past become the villains of the present. So it is with religion. The earliest Christians believed that the pagan deities were devils, and to employ them as to use black magic, miraculous heavenly events, they termed white magic. This was the sole distinction between the two. The old gods did not die, they fell into hell and became devils. The boogie, goblin, and bugaboo, used to frighten children, is derived from the Slavonic bog, which means God, as does Baga in Hindu. Unexplained possibilities, welcome. Many pleasures revered before the advent of Christianity were condemned by the new religion. It required little change over the transform the horns and cloven hooves of Pan into a most convincing devil. Pan's attributes could be neatly changed into charged with punishment sins, and so the metamorphosis was complete. The association of the goat with the devil is found in the Christian Bible, where the holiest day of the year, the Day of Atonement, was celebrated by casting lots for two goats without blemish, one to be offered to the Lord and one to Azazel. The goat carrying the sins of the people was driven into the desert and became a scapegoat. This is the origin of the goat, which is still used in lodge ceremonies today, as it was also used in Egypt, where once a year it was sacrificed to a god. So, beginning this is something that we kind of regularly talk about here. We know and we understand that Christianity, Judeo-Christian ideals and dogma are centered around fear, guilt. Much of our lives are surrounded by being guilty for being human, being guilty for having instincts and feelings and emotion, tying ourselves to promises that hinder the very nature of being human. We consistently and constantly tie ourselves to these promises that we will not do this, that we will sacrifice this, that we will stop being human in the name of God, in the name of Jesus, in the name of all of these things, that we will stop being who we are for some invisible man in the sky. And if there's one thing that we've learned from the left-hand path, just going to turn this down here a little bit. Lady Tessa, thank you very much for the 666 pounds. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you. So we are constantly bombarded with the idea of needing to be something different for the sake of someone else. Kelvin, welcome. And this is kind of the basis idea of Christianity, of Judeo-Christian dogma, of Abrahamic faith, whether it be Judaism, Christianity, Islam, whatever direction you decide to go with this. We are completely controlled by the idea of guilt, that there needs to be a certain way that we need to live. Islam being probably also one of the major evils here with its treatment of women. And I understand that I may very well be, attacked and canceled for this statement, but, any religion that forces, the segregation of men and women, and for women to hide themselves completely and wholly, from the public eye, to only be gazed upon like by their husband, right? Where their husband is allowed to have 5 wives, not just the one, is something that it stands wholly against Western values and the idea of progress and progression, whereas in Satanism, the female form is reveled in, it is worshipped, it is understood and looked at as being, a high form to spiritual connection, the connection of creating life, of carnal desire. It is there, and inside of that, it is not objectified. It is worshipped. Satanism in the left-hand path, one of the reasons why I call myself a philosophical Satanist is because of this very reason, that Satanism is the blueprint, the beginning part of left-hand path philosophy. The ideal of knowing your desires, knowing what you want to achieve in life, knowing who you are as a person, as a human being, and reveling in that, in those instincts, in those desires. And it is so true that within Christianity, if not for Satan being the all form of evil and there being a hell to damn you to, well, Christianity honestly wouldn't be where it is today now, would it be? Now, they understood something politically back then, is that in order to rally people behind a figurehead, you must have a common enemy. And this is a political ideal, right? You give the people something to hate, you give the people something to fear. And because of that hate and because of that fear, they will rally behind any figurehead that is promising to do away with that evil, to do away with that fear. And that is what Satan, Lucifer, and the devil became for Christianity and Abrahamic dogma. And with the left-hand path, the only thing you have to fear is yourself. And how is that? How is it that we fear ourselves? We fear ourselves because we fear failure. We fear the idea of not being enough, whether that be enough for someone else, enough in our lives, however you want to view it. We fear, the only thing we have to fear is ourselves and not putting our best foot forward. But understanding that there you go. I mean, that is definitely an aspect of it, right? Fear of your own choices. But because we're able to fear our own choices and we become, I am sorry, I'm touching my nose so much. My mustache is curling up and hitting my nose and it's very itchy. So my apologies. Fearing ourselves, understanding that the fear that we have of ourselves is something that we have control over. We can change our behaviors. We can change our perceptions. We can change the direction that we are moving. If we do not like something in our life, we have the power and ability to change that. Right? The left-hand path teaches us something extremely important. Whatever happens after this life, we are not 100% certain what comes after, whether it's reincarnation, whether it is some place that we go to wait in like a median place like limbo or whatever. But the one thing that we do understand, the one thing that we do know is that we are here now and that we will be here for the foreseeable future. And in that, it is our responsibility to make our lives as pleasurable as possible, to live your life inside the ideal that you need to prepare yourself for whatever comes after this. You need to spend the 60, 70 years, 80 years that you're going to be here on this plane, on this planet, in this life, preparing yourself and making yourself worthy for a place that you're not even sure that you're going to go to, and avoid and step away from all of the things that bring you gratification and pleasure on this plane. Seems a bit asinine to me. Truly seems a bit asinine. Because we are here in the now. We are here right now. The only thing that you are 100% guaranteed and certain of is this very moment that you are sitting in. And it is inside that moment that we are truly able to reach a more enlightened level of appreciation and gratification for the things that are in front of us. And even within the Christian ideal, according to the Christians, God created everything. So if God created everything and all the things here that are to be enjoyed and to allow us to elevate and feel more connected to ourselves and our fellow man, wouldn't a true loving God want you to enjoy your life instead of wasting it away, worshiping Him, trying to please Him, trying to please and gain the approval of a Father that is never there? The empty chair? Again, seems a bit asinine to me. Satan is the god of this earth. So says the Bible. So says the understanding of the world around us. Satan is the god of this earth, of the earthly plane. Regardless of how things were created, which I believe science brings us closer to the true nature of creation. The spiritual gratification. When elevating the body and the mind, you elevate the spirit. If you are clean of stress and hatreds, you are able to elevate. How are you able to do that? You're able to do that by allowing yourself the gratifications that you deserve in this world. That is how this works. Exactly. The true creator would not demand worship because it would be in no need of it. Exactly. A true creator knows that they are the creator. God was quite chummy with Satan for quite a long time in the Bible until the New Testament came along. Exactly. That's another thing that's actually pretty funny. You know, that is another thing. God and Satan were in the Old Testament in competition to see who could control more people. And at the end of the day, when we look at the stories of the Bible and we look at how those things are portrayed and the stories that are told, we only see one side of the perspective. But when we try to look at the whole perspective of what is going on in this situation, I honestly don't think that Satan or the devil is the evil one. Right? I mean, who is the person that, according to the Bible, drowned an entire planet of people because he didn't like the fact that they weren't worshiping him? Exactly. Satan has never demanded worship. In demonolatry, the entities that we work with, none of them demand worship. They are available for communication. They are available to be spoken to learn from, but they demand nothing. The sacrifice of time that we give in the rituals that we do is more than enough for most of the entities that we work with. Someone had to the job. Satan was that volunteer, I think. Well, I mean, if we look at it in Abrahamic values, so we're discussing on a basis of philosophy here, right? So I don't want this to get confused, because one of the things that I do constantly talk about during Mass here, everyone, is our need to break away from these Abrahamic values, and then we kind of go down the line of these Abrahamic dogmas and kind of use them to show their contradictions, right? And then that's exactly what we're doing. So we're using the Bible as a source because so much of our past has been stolen and incorporated into it. But the understanding and the necessity to break away from those Abrahamic ideals, those Abrahamic dogmas, is still present. Regardless of the conversation that we're having, it is a major dogma in today's society, and it has been for however long that they've been in power as far as being a primary religion, right? So when we discuss and we talk about, these comparisons between God and the devil, and how we look at Satan, and how we look at Lucifer, and how we look at, all of these entities that we work with, and we view them from a Abrahamic stance. One thing that was also said, that was also mentioned in here that we just read, was the gods of the old were cast down to hell, because the gods of the old understood the necessity of being connected with one's physical self to allow one's spiritual self to truly flourish. So, though the psychological, the physical, and the spiritual are all three separate aspects of being human, they are also inevitably intertwined with each other, and to only focus on one and ignore the other is to inevitably entomb all three. Okay? People think God was entirely all-loving. God. Well, I mean, if you go to the Old Testament, it was all fire and brimstone and wrath. I mean, hence the fucking flood, right? Starting anew. I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong here. I mean, this might be an overshoot, but it seems like whoever wrote the Bible, like the Old Testament and the New Testament, they had a thing for incest. Like, they really had a thing for incest, didn't they? I mean, the world starts with two people, right? And so essentially we're all fucking cousins, apparently. And then, after the world is completely populated, God gets pissed off and kills everybody again, right? And then starts the world again with Noah and his family. God had a thing for incest, man. It's a little screwy how the Bible has been kind of mapped out and put forward. They had a thing for a lot of things. Yeah, exactly. It's just like, if you really kind of go through it and you really kind of look at it, like, I mean, you wipe out the world and you leave one family, what do you think is going to happen? Right? Which is, again, another thing, if we look at science and how science works, that kind of disproves kind of this idea of these events that supposedly took place in the Bible, because we know, scientifically speaking, that incest, unfortunately, does diminish mental capacity. Right? We've seen this. This has been scientifically proven that the further that incest goes through generation and generation, that the psychological capacity of the person that is a victim of being a child of incest has a diminished mental capacity. We do not see that across the board. In that case, if that is the case, and the Bible is truth, then that means we all should be drooling on ourselves, incapable of really being able to learn anything. Uh-huh. Exactly. See, I don't think they really kind of thought this through when they wrote it out. It's a good question. So, I mean, there is kind of the interpretation that says that the Garden of Eden was like a different dimension that isn't actually on Earth, and that when they ate from the fruit, that they were cast out of Eden and sent to the real world where people have already existed, even though that's not outlined in the Bible. That's some people's interpretation. And then this is another aspect of this dogma, people, is the fact that, you know, the things, the holes in the stories that exist are filled in by interpretation, but then they want you to take other things literally, like, for example, the story of Jesus and his crucifixion, right? Like, it can't be. It can't be. It is impossible to them that it is a metaphor for something, that it has to be absolutely literal. But then when they go into things that are, they would consider a sin, like incest, right? There's a million different interpretations of what is happening in the background that isn't even written in the Bible, because they need to make the narrative fit. The word God has been perverted and does not mean the actual meaning in our modern language, unfortunately. Greco-Roman has changed many of our ancient beliefs. Look at Sanskrit, for instance. True, that's 100% correct. That's 100% correct, Bjorn. Language is an important aspect of this. Like, this is something that I constantly talk about, like, especially when we begin to talk about the idea of demons, right? And we talk about inside of demons and demonology and demonolatry, what the term demon means and where it is derived from and the importance of it. And people have tried to fight me on this unsuccessfully, right? Saying that in ancient Greek, they had a different word that was used to describe demon, or like a negative spirit, and that the modern version of demon is not derived from daemon from the ancient Greek, when it very well is. And so this is another example, and I know linguistics. I mean, I was an English teacher for 16 years, so I'm very fluid in the understanding of linguistics and where words come from. And it is extremely important, the derivative of where words are originated from, and then how they have changed in meaning throughout the years based on other people's necessity. So demon is directly derived from the ancient Greek daemon, which just means a guiding spirit. That's it. Just a spiritual entity. That is all it means. And yes, in ancient Greek, they had their own word for demonic entity, for an evil entity. They had their own, their own word for it. We didn't use that word. Demon is not derived from that. It's derived from daemon. The history and the lineage of the words that we are using is extremely important. Most of our words have some root in other languages, whether that be Latin or Greek, Italian, French. So many of our words, most of our words are derived from Latin, and then others are Germanic in origin, Germanic. There's a lot of the words that we use that are Slavic, that come from Slavic roots. Some of the original kind of languages, like the older languages in the world, a lot of what we use in English, I mean, modern English really didn't start to take hold until William Shakespeare, right? A lot of like what was considered today to be modern English, was quite literally invented by Shakespeare for his plays. A word didn't exist to describe something, and dude just made it up. Like, so a lot of what we use today comes from that. One of the things I love about English is the fact that, English is based in art. Like, the English language is very much has its roots dug deep into art culture. Poetry and plays and things of that things that are creative, right? And does in fact make English one of the most creative languages out there. Quite literally, like its very history, its very foundations English is one of the most creative languages out there. But many people ignore the history of language and try to create meaning that has no connection to what it is that they're saying. Like demon. Demon is not an evil spirit. Yes. Well, so the way that a daemon worked is a guiding spirit. And so they're generally speaking, Zeus would assign a daemon to a person to guide them through their life. Right? At some point in their life they would be like assigned a daemon by Zeus. And the whole concept of possession, and which is why I think the Catholics went with daemon, because of this whole idea of possession, because the daemon would essentially possess your body and help you internally in your mind voice, your consciousness, to guide you through your life and make better decisions. And that the ones that were truly lucky and truly chosen by Zeus to be successful in their lives were given a daemon at the beginning of their life, which greatly outlines the concept that is used inside of Christian possession. Right? Which is why I believe instead of using the Greek word for an evil spirit or a bad spirit, they chose daemon, is because daemon lives in the body. And what is something that would create a large amount of fear amongst a unintellectual populace is the idea of losing control of your own body, right? Possession. Heard somewhere that it's impossible to comprehend mechanics without learning Swahili. French is romance, English is art, Swahili is science. I would completely agree. I would completely agree with that. Yes, French, Spanish, Italian, those are all romance languages. Because of the way that they're spoken, right? French, Spanish, and Italian are languages that are spoke with the tongue. English, German, Russian are spoke more with the throat and the upper diaphragm when we speak. Hence, it's essentially inherently more guttural than other languages. Swahili, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've never actually looked into Swahili because it has not been a language that has been presented to me to understand. So I don't have a significant understanding of Swahili, but I have no reason to doubt that statement. Languages, like if you go back to, the Aztecs, or the Mayans, their language, the way that they communicated was directly, influenced by astrology, right? And this is another thing also with Abrahamic dogma, Judeo-Christian dogma, that is, it's a bit irritating, is the focus on the end of the world, right? Now, what's another way to make sure that everyone's going to fall in line, right? So if the concept or idea of burning in hell for the rest of eternity isn't enough to scare the shit out of you to make you listen to the things that they tell you to do, then they have a little extra added, sprinkled on top, that the end of the world is constantly nigh, right? The end of the world is always coming. And because we're not 100% certain exactly when the end of the world is going to happen, well, we need to be prepared for it, right? Because it's going to happen in somebody's lifetime. It might be yours, it might be your kids, it might be your grandkids' lifetime, but eventually at some point it's going to happen, and therefore we need to be ready for that to happen, right? And we see this constantly throughout history. In the 60s, there was a big wave of, apocalypse believers. And then again in the late 90s, going into the year 2000, you know, obviously I think a lot of people here, even though you may not have lived through it, you know what Y2K is, and you know why people freaked out about it, because everybody thought the computers were going to shut down and everything was going to go to shit. You know, when the clock hit midnight going over into the year 2000, it didn't happen. And then a bunch of fucking people thought that the end of the world was going to be 2012 because apparently the Mayan calendar ended in 2012, right? And that's when everything was going to end, you know. And I just love how the Christians, because they're constantly looking for that marketing to say that the end of the world is nigh, you know, the Aztecs or the Mayan calendar ends in 2012. So they jumped on that bandwagon and said, yes, the end of the world is going to happen in 2012. You have prayer groups all over the place. And what happens? 2012 hits and nothing happens. And it was disgustingly hilarious to me when that happened, the whole 2012 end of the world scheme, because of a calendar ending. There was no documentation that said that this was going to be the end of the world. It's just the calendar stopped at 2012. That would be like me buying a calendar from Walmart, putting it on my wall, and on December 31st saying that the next day is the end of the world because that's the end of the calendar. It's got to end sometime. At some point, you were the newest life to be born, and one day you will be the next person to die. This is 100% certain. This is 100% true. Anything pagan? Yeah, I mean, well, and the thing is the worst part about it is that the point that I constantly try to make during the Black Mass, but this is something that needs to be understood on a great level, is that the belief system, the structure of Christianity, of Abrahamic, dogma, is directly stolen from paganism, from what we consider paganism. All of the old gods were cast to hell and made into demons and were made to be feared, made to be evil, so that this false ideal, this story, could be used to control people. And I constantly tell people, so the advent of Christianity started after Catholicism. Catholicism was kind of like the forerunner of all of this, right? Catholic, started as a political party, not a religion. Religion was injected into it later on to control people, and which is where the Bible comes from and all of this stuff. And then from that, they just kind of build on top of that. They build on top of that direction. It was politics. And then after that, people kind of started breaking off. And that's where you kind of get the King James Version of the Holy Bible and Christianity and Protestants and Baptists and all of these things. I love how universal and beautiful the English language is and how we communicate with each other. Yet the English language was dumbed down by the church and our society. And yes, 100%. Dumbed down in multiple different ways. See, in English, Old English, things were actually spelt the way that they were said, right? So if you were to say something, you would spell it the same way that you say it. And for some reason, down the line, somebody thought it would be a good idea to just change the spelling of everything, and it's no longer constructed that way, which was what makes English one of the more difficult languages to learn. Like, for example, Spanish is pretty easy to learn because Spanish is written exactly how it is said. How you say something, as long as you understand the alphabet, and you can say the alphabet in Spanish, at that point, you can pretty much learn Spanish because everything is written exactly how it sounds. right? The way that the letters connect to each other and the sounds that they make do not change that much outside of the alphabet. And it makes it a pretty easy language to learn. English used to be that way, and now it isn't. So, linguistics is a huge aspect of this. When we read our history, when we dig into these things and we begin to kind of look further in, we do have to kind of look, and we do have to kind of understand and try to kind of start dissecting where these buzzwords are coming from that we're using. Things like hell, heaven, angel, demon, evil, right? We have to kind of look where these words are coming from. Era, right? Era, age, where these words are coming from and where the translation is coming from, because there's so many mistranslations that are just grabbed onto and then run with. It's kind of ridiculous. The point of the matter is we need to break away from these Abrahamic ideals, because holding on to these concepts of good, evil, and heaven, and hell, and God, and the devil is the very thing that is breaking us down. So long as we hold on to these ideas and we hold on to these concepts and we interject these concepts into our belief systems, we are stepping further away from our true connection with spirituality, our true spiritual selves. Because these ideas, these dogmas are based around fear and guilt. That is what these ideas are built on. As long as we begin to truly understand that Abrahamic dogma, Judeo-Christian dogma, is constructed and completely built along the premise of fear and guilt for being who you are, and we hold on to these, then we are going to continue to live inside of this idea and live inside of this concept and put a wall in front of our spiritual progress. We are going to stop ourselves. The left-hand path shows us and teaches us that the main thing that you need to fear is yourself, and fear of failure, of failing yourself. You are the only person to blame for your failures. This sounds harsh, but this is a beautiful concept. This is a beautiful concept because that means if you are the only person to blame for your failures, then you can change the way that you do things and become successful in any of your endeavors inside of your life, whether that be spiritual, whether that be business, whether that be romance, whatever the situation may be. If you accept yourself as the unified point of failure inside of failed endeavors, and you are able to analyze your actions and your behaviors, then you have the power to change that direction, to no longer fail in those things that you do not want to fail in. And with another beautiful concept brought to us by the left-hand path, you only fail if you stop trying. That's another beautiful concept here inside of the left-hand path, is that if there's something that you are trying to do and you have not been able to do that thing to reach the level that you want to reach inside of any of these said things, and you continue to try, you haven't failed yet. Because failure marks an end point. To say I failed is to mark an end point of no longer attempting to make something work. So if we can understand that the only unified point of failure is ourselves, that we are the reason why something is failing, that something is not working, and we are continuing to try to make sure that this thing works, we need no God nor demon to help us cross the finish line the way that we want to finish first place. It is our responsibility inside of our own lives to reach that finish line in the way that we want to, at the level that we want to. And so long as we continue to try and we continue to force ourselves to move forward and we continue to break the mold and break the glass ceiling, however you want to mention it, however you want to talk about it, whatever that limit is, whatever that hurdle is that is in front of you, you run and you try to jump the hurdle and you fall down. If you get back up and you loop around and you try to jump it again, you didn't fail. It didn't work, but you didn't fail because you're trying again. And eventually, what's going to happen, as long as you're self-aware enough to analyze your own actions and analyze the things that you are doing and say, I need to change this to make sure that I can jump higher. I need to go faster. Eventually, you're going to jump over that hurdle and you're not even going to touch the bar. And then you get to move on to the next one. And that is what the left-hand path teaches us. That is what Satanism, that is what the Satanic Bible teaches us in an overarching basic concept. Personal responsibility. You are responsible for where you are. There are many external factors that are taken into consideration in our lives, especially when we're children. We don't get to choose our parents. We don't get to choose the area in which we grow up and things like that. Those are kind of predetermined for us upon birth. But again, the same concept happens inside of that, regardless of how difficult your life might have been as a child. You're not there anymore. You didn't fail. That's not failure. It wasn't what you wanted it to be, but now you have the choice and you have the ability to make those choices and to change those things around you. You don't like where you work? Find another job. You don't like where you live? Move. And it's not to say that these things are easy. Like when people make these statements, the first thing that people kind of attack and go after is, well, I don't have the money. Well, I need to pay my rent. I need to do this. I need to do that. Right? Exactly. Failure is just another learning experience. So we have all of these excuses of why we can't or don't want to do something because of our current circumstance. But you have to understand the current circumstance that we're in because of choices that we made and that we felt that we needed to make in order to make something work and to make something successful. We felt that we need to make certain choices. If you're making a choice that you don't want to make because you want something to work, it's probably something that doesn't need to work in your life. Think about it that way. If you're doing something that you don't want to be doing to make this thing work because you think you want this thing, but you have to do this thing that you don't want to do to get this thing, then you really need to evaluate this thing. Is this really something that you need or want in your life? If it's making you do this, right? Think about it, right? Think about it in an extreme example, in an abusive relationship. Think about it in that concept. In your mind, you want to be able to make the relationship work for one reason or another. This person is abusive, whether it's emotionally abusive, physically abusive, pick your poison. And inside your mind, you're telling yourself, I don't want to deal with this, but I want to be with this person. So I have to deal with this to be with this person. Do I need to say more? You have to deal with pain, suffering, and abuse because you want this. You have to suffer this because you want this. And that's what Judeo-Christian dogma wants to teach you. That's what Judeo-Christian dogma wants you to believe, is that you need to suffer in order to gain the things that you want. And that's just simply not true. One second, guys. There are certain things in life that require pain, but even certain pain is good pain, like exercise, working out, right? You want to have the form and the body that you want, you need to work for it. But even that pain increases dopamine in the pleasure centers of the brain. So it's understanding that line and that difference of what's acceptable suffering that's not really even suffering and what actual suffering is to reach a goal. There's a whole lot of information for a first timer. Different version, I guess, but true. Same Bjorn, same. So this all falls under self-awareness. This all falls under being aware of oneself and what one's needs are, and being able to have that awareness to draw that line, to have that limit, to know when to say, no, this is enough, I need to change. That's what it is. That's what it's about. There's no need to suffer in order to obtain something that you want. Unless you know that that suffering is something that is going to allow you to reach a higher level of self, like working out, like doing ritual work. There's a line, and we need to understand those lines. And through self-awareness, we're able to understand that line and say, this is suffering that is going to allow me to reach a positive. This is positive suffering that has allowed me to reach this. And this is negative suffering to allow me to have something I probably shouldn't have to begin with. Candace, again, thank you very much for the $10. Greatly appreciate it. So this is kind of where we stand with this. And the left-hand path helps us understand these differences and helps us draw these lines, because we have to have different lines in the sand that we won't cross. And to respect those lines, to respect oneself and respect that line and draw that line, say, no further, no more. We're going this way. Anyway, everyone, thank you very much for coming. It was great to see everyone. Thank you for the super chats. I greatly appreciate it. You guys are absolutely amazing. Okay, as always, hail Satan, hail Lilith, hail Lucifer, hail Pineman, hail Baphomet, and as always, hail thy fucking self. And we'll see you guys next week. Have a wonderful Sunday. Peace out.